The lights in the grand hall cut out for exactly 3 seconds, and in those 3 seconds, I knew someone was coming for her. I am Marcus Webb, and on that night, I was not a soldier. I was not a guard. On paper, I was a babysitter, hired by the Jethkari embassy to watch over an 8-year-old alien princess named Elira, while her parents argued treaty terms with beings who did not trust humans any further than they could throw us. But when those lights flickered back on and I saw 2 men in unmarked uniforms moving through the crowd with too much purpose, none of that mattered anymore. Elira was standing near the dessert table in her blue ceremonial dress, laughing at something a young coalition diplomat had said. She did not see them yet. I did. I moved. 6 months earlier, nobody would have believed I could move that fast for her. When I first took the job, I was just a name on a list of unemployed veterans that the embassy staffing office handed to worried parents. Humanity had only just joined the wider coalition of species, and most of the galaxy still saw us as clumsy, temporary help. Good for lifting crates. Not good for anything that required trust. Elira certainly did not trust me. The first week she called me the ape they hired, to my face, loud enough for the kitchen staff to hear. She was sharp for her age, and she had grown up surrounded by people who bowed to her title before they ever looked at her as a child. I was the first person in her life who refused to bow. When she tried to skip her lessons, I sat her back down. When she threw a tantrum because her favorite coalition holo show was canceled for the evening, I let her be upset instead of rushing to fix it for her. She hated me for about a month. Then, slowly, something changed. I remember the night she could not sleep because of a memory from her homeworld. Something about the sound of alarms during the last war her people fought before joining the coalition. She never told me the details, and I never asked. I just sat outside her door until her breathing slowed, the way I used to sit with soldiers half my age who could not close their eyes without seeing something they wished they could forget. I remember teaching her how to make a proper fist after older kids at a diplomatic function mocked her for being soft, for being a princess who could not even defend herself. Her mother would have been horrified if she knew a human taught her daughter that. I did it anyway, quietly, in the garden behind the residence, because no child should feel powerless in a room full of adults who claimed to protect her. I remember the night market. She was forbidden from going. Of course, princesses do not wander through crowded human streets eating fried dough from a paper cone. I took her anyway, wrapped her in a plain coat, and let her be a kid for 2 hours. She held my hand the whole time, not because she needed to, but because she wanted to. Somewhere in those months, she stopped calling me handler. Then she stopped calling me Marcus. She started calling me Uncle Marcus, and the first time she said it, I had to turn away so she would not see my face. None of that was in my thoughts as I crossed the hall that night, weaving between guests in silk and metal finery. My eyes locked on the 2 men closing in on her. Security here was built for elegance, not for danger. Coalition guards stood stiff and formal near the doors, trained to recognize protocol violations, not fast hands and hidden intent. They had not moved yet. I doubt they even understood what was happening. I reached Elira just as one of the men grabbed her arm. "Let go of her," I said, and my voice came out lower and harder than I expected. The man barely looked at me. To him, I was furniture, a human employee, nothing worth his attention. That was his mistake. I caught his wrist, twisted it away from her, and pulled her behind me in the same motion, the way I had done 100 times in training years ago on a different world, for different reasons. The second man reached for something at his belt. I did not wait to see what it was. I stepped into him instead of away, closing the distance so whatever he was holding would be useless, and knocked it from his hand before it ever came up. It skittered across the polished floor, and somewhere behind me I heard Elira gasp. "Run to the side doors," I told her. "Now." She hesitated, just for a second, looking at me, instead of running like I told her. "Go," I said again, sharper this time, and finally she moved. I stayed between her and the 2 men as she slipped through the crowd toward the service corridor I had scouted on the first night I worked here. An old habit from my old life. Always know your exits. The first man recovered and lunged at me. I sidestepped and used his own momentum to send him into a marble pillar. The second circled wide, trying to get around me toward the corridor, toward her. I would not allow that. I moved to block him, and for a moment it became a contest of positioning more than force. Him trying to get past me refusing to let him. Guests were screaming now, scattering, and somewhere far off I heard coalition guards finally shouting orders, too late and too slow. The second man made his move, and I met him. It was quick, ugly, and over in seconds. When the guards finally arrived, weapons raised, both men were down and I was standing over them, breathing hard, my jacket torn, but on my feet. Elira was safe in the corridor doorway, exactly where I told her to wait. She had not run further. She had stayed close enough to see. That was when I felt it, a sting along my side that I had been too focused to notice until the fight was over. I looked down and saw the tear in my shirt, the mark that should not have been there. I remember thinking, distantly, that I should probably sit down. I woke up later in a coalition medical bay, bright lights above me, unfamiliar machines humming softly around my bed. My side ached under a tight bandage, but I was alive, and the pain told me that was more than some people got that night. Voices filled the room before I fully opened my eyes. Jethkari guards stood near the door. The ambassador, Illyra's father, stood with his arms crossed, speaking in low tones with a coalition official I did not recognize, someone with silver markings on their uniform that suggested rank. The human's effectiveness is, frankly, unusual for someone in a domestic role, the official was saying, as if I were not lying 3 feet away, as if I could not hear every word. He was hired to watch a child, the ambassador replied carefully, not to engage hostile agents. And yet he did both, the official said. We will need to review his file. Such capability, unregistered, unmonitored, raises questions. I wanted to tell them I was just doing my job, that I had not thought about registration or monitoring or anything, except getting between Illyra and the men who wanted to hurt her. But before I could speak, the doors opened, and small, fast footsteps crossed the room before anyone could stop them. Illyra, you should not be here, one of the guards said, reaching for her. She pulled her arm free and kept walking until she reached my bedside, ignoring the ambassador, ignoring the official, ignoring every rule of protocol that usually surrounded her like armor. He is not the babysitter, she said, loud enough for the whole room to hear, her voice steady in a way I had never heard from her before. He is my family. The room went quiet. I saw the coalition official's expression shift, serf, confusion at first, then something closer to understanding as the ambassador's face changed too. I did not know, in that moment, what those words meant, under Jethkari law. I found out later that a formal declaration like that, spoken by a child of her rank, in front of witnesses, was not just sentiment, it carried real weight. It meant something legal, something binding, something that could not simply be dismissed by officials with silver markings on their uniforms. But in that moment, lying in that bed with my side aching and my chest tight for reasons that had nothing to do with the wound, I did not think about law or politics. I thought about a scared little girl who could not sleep because of memories from a war she should never have witnessed, and a stubborn kid who once called me an ape to my face, and a princess who held my hand in a night market because she wanted to, not because she had to. I am not going anywhere, I told her, and she finally let herself cry, the tears she had been holding back through the whole chaos of that night finally breaking free. The ambassador stepped closer, his expression unreadable for a long moment, before it softened into something I had not seen from him before. Gratitude, plain and simple. Thank you, he said quietly, for protecting her. That was never a job to me, I said, not for a long time now. The official cleared their throat, clearly uncomfortable with the emotion in the room, and began speaking about reports and reviews and formal recognitions that would need to be filed. I let the words wash over me. None of it mattered as much as the small hand gripping mine, refusing to let go. In the weeks that followed, word of that night spread through the coalition diplomatic circles faster than any official report could contain it. Other delegations, families who had always assumed humans were only good for heavy labor, started asking quiet questions about hiring their own human staff, unsettled by what one untrained, unregistered ordinary man had done using nothing but instinct and care for a child who was not his own by blood. I never wanted any of that attention. I did not take the job to prove anything about humanity. And I certainly did not fight that night to change anyone's mind about what we were capable of. I did it because a girl I had grown to love as if she were my own family was in danger, and there was no version of that night where I would have stood aside. Illyra healed faster than I did, the resilience of childhood carrying her back to laughter and lessons and stubborn arguments about bedtime within days. I healed slower, but I healed, and every evening after that, when her lessons were done and the embassy grew quiet, she would find me wherever I was and simply sit beside me. Not saying much, just being near. One evening, weeks later, as the sun set over the embassy gardens, she asked me if I had been scared that night. Yes, I told her honestly. I was terrified. Then why did you do it? She asked. I thought about the question for a long moment before answering. Because being scared has never stopped me from doing what mattered, I said. And you matter more than anything I have ever been afraid of. She leaned against my side, careful of the place where my wound still ached faintly, and said nothing more. She did not need to. I came into that embassy as a man with a job title that made people smile politely, and then forget me. I stayed because somewhere between homework arguments and quiet nights and one desperate fight in a crowded hall, I stopped being the babysitter. I became something the title never could have promised. I became hers, and she became mine, and no treaty, no title, and no law written by careful, cautious officials could ever take that away.